Good morning, all of you. This is time that we discuss the greatest American novelist, William Faulkner. And he is actually named William Cuthbert Faulkner. Faulkner was born in 1897 and he died only in 1962. And he is known for his Yokinapataf novels. He was born and brought up in Mississippi. And in Mississippi there is a county called Yokinapataf County. And almost all his novels are set in the Yokinapataf County, the southern area of America, Yokinapataf. And almost all his novels are set in the background of the Yokinapataf. Therefore, they are called the Yokinapataf novels. But a few of his novels which he had written earlier are not set in Yokinapataf. His first novel was Soldier's Pay, and it was not set in Yokinapataf. It was in 1925. In 1925, he came out with his novel, Soldier's Pay. And after that, he came out with his next novel, Mosquitoes. And the third novel was Flags in the Dust. And it was the first Yokinapataf novel. Flags in the Dust. And it was the first Yokinapataf novel. And the other two are not set in Yokinapataf. The first novel, Soldier's Pay, and the second novel, Mosquitoes, are not set in Yokinapataf. Remember always, UGC may ask you the question, identify the novel that is not set in the Yokinapataf county. Since Faulkner is known for his Yokinapataf novels. And the novels that are not set in Yokinapataf are Soldier's Pay and Mosquitoes. The first novel that was set in Yokinapataf was Flags in the Dust. And it was later revised as Sartoris. 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 And William Faulkner was the most honored of American novelists. He received Pulitzer Prize twice. And the Pulitzer Prize were awarded to him for his unpopular novels. Actually, he received a Pulitzer Prize for unpopular novels. Like A Fable. A Fable was produced by him in 1954. He received his first Pulitzer for this novel. And the last novel written by him in 1962, in the year of his death. It was called The Rivers, R-A-I-V-E-R-S, The Rivers, The Wanderers. And it was published posthumously, and he was awarded the Pulitzer also posthumously. And we have found a few people who were awarded Pulitzer Prize posthumously. One among the popular was O'Neill. O'Neill was awarded Pulitzer after his death. One Pulitzer out of his 4 Pulitzer Prizes. And then Sylvia Plath, I told you, was awarded Pulitzer Prize after her death. And in the case of William Faulkner also, the second Pulitzer went to him after his death for his last novel, The Rivers. The two novels that received a Pulitzer Prize are A Fable in 1952 and The Rivers in 1962, in the year of his death. And he was very famously awarded the Nobel Prize in 1949. And when he went to receive the Nobel Prize in the next year, Bertrand Russell was also there to receive the Nobel Prize. Russell received the Nobel Prize in 1950 and Faulkner received the Nobel in 1939. And both were awarded the Nobel Prize in a single function. So the Nobel Committee could not hold the convention in the year 1948. Therefore, they awarded Faulkner and Bertrand Russell the Nobel Prize in 1960. And as a novelist, Faulkner was a great experimenter. And he brought literary modernism in American literature. So, very interestingly, in one of his novels, entitled As I Lay Dying, he uses only 5 words for a chapter. A chapter is described only in 5 words. Very interestingly, the words are, my mother is a fish. My mother is a fish. And it was one question asked by UGC very recently. In one of the novels of Faulkner, there is a chapter with 5 words and there are no descriptions. And identify the title given to the chapter. And it was, my mother is a fish. And being an experimenter, he had brought many new techniques and modernist ways in American literature. For example, in his Absalom, we find him using the longest sentence in literature. And it contains 1288 words. So he uses one of the longest sentences in his novel Absalom. He uses one of the longest sentences that has got 1288 words. And interestingly, the sentence begins with just exactly like father. And the sentence contains 1288 words. One of the longest words in a novel. One of the longest line with too many words in literature. And it can be found in Faulkner's novel Absalom. And it is a sentence with 1288 words. And the sentence interestingly begins with just exactly like father. And it is identified by the Guinness Book of World Records and accepted by the world as the longest in literature, the longest line in literature. And in his novels, he employs many new narrative techniques. For example, stream of consciousness was very effectively used by him in American literature. We come to find stream of consciousness popularized by Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, D.H. Lawrence, E.M. Pulitzer, and the postmodern writers also in English literature. And in American literature, actually, it was William Faulkner who introduced the modernist technique of stream of consciousness. And it was actually a great literary movement pioneered by novelists like James Joyce and Virginia Woolf. And this kind of a narrative discards chronological order, and we don't come to find any chronological order in such a novel. And there will be multiple narrators. And there will be shifting of tenses from present to past and vice versa. And the sentences may be long and complex. And one of his very popular novels, The Sound and Fury, illustrates almost all the techniques of stream of consciousness. Very effectively, these techniques are used in his popular novel, Sound and the Fury. And the novel is regarded as the first successfully innovative and experimental American novel, Sound and Fury. Actually, this novel has been prescribed in most of the universities, and you may be familiar with the story of the novel. And most of the novels of Faulkner explore the deterioration of the southern aristocracy in the Yokanapatawpha County. the deterioration of the aristocracy in the Yokinapatappa County, say in the southern side of America. And it occurred after the Civil War. And most of the families presented in his novels do have failed sons, disgraced daughters, corrupt parents, and so on. The deterioration of the southern aristocracy is pictured by Faulkner in most of his novels. And the best example can be found in The Sound and Fury. And many of the family members have to face in such a novel, we come to find many of the family members will have to face mental retardation. And for example, in Sound and Fury, we come to find a man of 33 years behaving as a mental retarded child, behaving in a childish manner. And in such a novel, we come to find the mental retardation or the mental abnormality will be leading to death also. And in Sound and the Fury, we come to find a young boy committing suicide by jumping into the river, thinking that he had incestuous relation with his sister and that he was responsible for the birth of his sister's child. And in fact, he committed suicide, and it was a mental abnormality in the part of the character, and he is named Quentin. And the mentally retarded boy is called Benchy. And the chronological order also is not observed in The Sound and the Fury. Very interestingly, there will be no chronology practiced in a stream of consciousness novel. For example, in the novel Sound and Fury, the first part opens on April 7, 1928. And the second part of the novel begins on June 2nd, 1910, some 18 years before. The first book begins on April 7, 1928, and the second book speaks of June 2nd, 1910. And in the third section, we come to find it is April 6, 1928. Actually, the novel started on April 7, 1928. And the third book begins on April 8, 1928. But interestingly, in the third book, interestingly, opens on April 6. So the book begins on April 7. The second book, some 18 years before. And the third book, a day before, April 6. And the last book, a day after the first book, April 8. And all these years are 1928. And remember always, the Sound and Fury contains 4 books or 4 sections. And these sections, very interestingly, begin on different dates. And there is no chronology observed in presenting the dates. So when the novel begins, it is April 7, 1928. And the second book begins on June 2nd, 18 years before in 1910. And the third book begins on April 6, a day before the first book, again 1928. And the fourth section begins on April 8, 1928. And very interestingly, in these 4 books, we come to find the narratives are also different. Like in a stream of consciousness novel, there are multiple narratives. For example, the first book that begins on April 7, 1928 is written from the perspective of Benjamin, or otherwise he is called Benchy. He is mentally retarded. He is 33 years old. And he has got a caretaker also. In fact, there has been a caretaker, a boy looking after him. And he is found playing with the boy. And the boy suggests him to go for a circus. And the caretaker boy is called Luster. The daughter of, say the son of Frony. And there is a Negro family also attached with the Compson's family. And the last book is narrated by Dilsey, a Negro servant maid, a senior servant maid attached with the family. It is she who brought up the children of the Compson's family. Compson's family was a southern aristocratic family on the brink of deterioration, decay, destruction. And there are mentally retarded members, and there are members who commit suicide, and there are promiscuous girls, so delivering children without properly getting married. And these are the things that we come to find in the Sound and Fury as part of the family of the southern aristocrats called the Compson family. And the children in the Compson family are brought up by a Negro servant maid, a senior lady, and she is named Dilsey. And she is the protagonist of the fourth book. In the fourth book, the protagonist is the Negro servant maid Dilsey. And Dilsey has got a daughter named Frony. And Frony's son Lester is the caretaker of Benji. And in the beginning of the novel, we come to find Benji Compson, a mentally retarded man, aged 33, but behaving like a child, and doesn't have the power to do things by his own. Someone must be there to help him to do his everyday activities, to give him breakfast, to clean his teeth, to wash his face, to give him dress, and to make him dressed up properly, and to look after him, and to help him sleep also. Someone must be there, and the caretaker now is a boy, and he is named Lester. And the relation of these people will have to be studied at the end. I will make a detailed account of the relation between these people. I told you, Dilsey is the Negro servant, and her husband is called Roskis, but Roskis is Dutch. And they have a son named TP, T and P, TP. And the death of Roskis is also discussed in the novel through the memory of Benji. And the first caretaker to Benji was Versha, another son. So Dilsey and Roskis are Negro couple attached with the Compson family. And they have a son named TP. And Roskis becomes Dutch. And they have another son named Versh. And Versh was the first caretaker of Benji. And TP became the next caretaker. And now Luster is the caretaker of Benji. And Luster is actually the son of Frony. And Frony is the daughter of Dilsey. And we have to identify the family tree of the Negro servants. Dilsey's family tree also to be properly understood, and I will give you a detail at the end. Not now. And what I want to tell you now is that Benji, the 33-year-old man, is actually found behaving like a child. And in his memory there are a number of things. So he remembers seeing the undergarment of his sister while the sister was climbing up a tree. In fact, to reach the first floor. She was found climbing a tree, and Benji was standing underneath, and when he looked up, he found the undergarment of his sister Caddy. And before Caddy left the place, it was Caddy who looked after Benji. And his memory is filled with such things. So he also remembers another death, the death of his grandmother. And she was called Damudi. And he also remembers the death of Dilsey's husband, Roscus. And he wanted his caretaker to take him to see the circus. And this is what we come to find in the opening book of the novel. And the opening book begins on April 7, 1928. And Faulkner comes to give a briefing of the life of the Compsons there. The Compson family is constituted of 3 sons and a daughter. And Benji is the youngest, and he is now 33. And the eldest was Quintin. Quintin was the eldest. And it was he who committed suicide as he was studying in the college. So he wrongly believed that he had incestuous relation with his sister Caddy. And he committed suicide. And I told you, the family is constituted of 3 sons. And the eldest is Quintin Compson, a very good boy, intelligent also, but slightly abnormal in his mental condition. And this is the reason why he committed suicide, Quintin Compson. And Quintin is also a link character in Faulkner's novels. In other novels also we come to find the character of Quintin. For example, in Faulkner's novel Absalom, the narrator of the story is Quintin Compson. The narrator of the story is Quintin Compson. And he describes the story before his suicide. And he committed suicide on June 2nd, 1910. Actually, it is the day he committed suicide. And Absalom, the novel is described by him in the year 1909. So it was in 1910 he committed suicide. And this character, Quintin Compson, is a link character that we have to remember. In his next novel, Absalom also, we come to find Quintin Compson. And Quintin is actually the narrator there. And he narrates the story of Absalom